Okay, so today we're joined by Kevin Farrenkopf from HCN Bank here in Riverside in the Inland Empire. He is the president and CEO of the organization and has been for more than 2 decades. And Kevin, welcome. Appreciate you coming on.
Good to be here.
Great. I'd love to, if you could tell me first a little bit about how long you've been in that capacity. I know that HCN Bank has only been HCN Bank for a couple of years, but your
Right.
roots go very deeply into the community over nearly half a century. Give me a little bit of background about yourself and the bank as a whole.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, I've been in banking now for in excess of 40 years. I grew up in Southern California in the beautiful city of Venice, in between, well, you know where that is, and right near Santa Monica. Have lived in Southern California pretty much my whole life. Went to school, did my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, uh, did the master's program at UCLA. So I've always been close to Southern California. I started in banking back in basically 19, I guess that would be 83, but I've been with, which started the Bank of Hemet since 2001, so 23 years. As you mentioned, we changed our name in, that was about 2 years ago now. So anyway, that was kind of it. The rationale for changing the name, because a lot of people ask, is it was fairly common with banks that had a city in their name, because from a perception standpoint, it kind of pigeonholed you a little bit. And one of the unique things about our bank is that, and this is kind of unique for a community bank, we do lending nationwide. And we're in, I think, 44 states right now. We have deposits in all 50 states. And it's a little bit of a disconnect when we were talking to, for instance, loan brokers or even existing clients. You know, we've been doing out-of-state lending for many years, but they were saying, "Oh, you lend outside of California?" Some people thought we only lended in the Inland Empire. So it removed an obstacle, and almost immediately it became easier to kind of export that brand outside of just a limited geographical area. So that was the method behind the madness, and so far it's worked pretty well. The transition has been fairly smooth.
Excellent. So HCN is what I would describe as beyond just a community bank, that you are full service from the standpoint that you offer personal banking services as
Right.
well as business banking services.
That's correct.
And I really kind of want to focus on the business side, but really quickly, can you talk about your general offerings, what the personal banking side looks like?
Sure. I think anytime, I mean, even though I would say that we're primarily a business bank, let's face it, business leaders have to have personal accounts. So you have to, the last thing you want to do is tell the owner of a business, sorry, we don't have that consumer product, you need to go elsewhere. So we're going to have the suite of personal, consumer products. We have the checking, the savings, the money market. What we don't do is like, for instance, residential mortgage loans. We've, ever since Rocket Mortgage and some of the larger scale players came out, it makes no sense for smaller banks that focus on other areas to try to be all things to all people. So our solution is, if we have somebody who's asking about it, we never want to say, no, we don't have it. We want to say, we're not a specialist in that area, but here's who we would recommend you talk to. And so I would say for pretty much any financial inquiry that we have, there's a handoff. And I think clients understand that. We tell them, hey, go here because they can do it more efficiently than we can. And simultaneously retain their relationship with our bank, because that to me is just a value add. We don't try to be all things to everyone. We understand our lane, we do our lane well, but we also understand that other companies can do some of these other products better. And as long as we can hand it off, that's kind of our game.
Okay, so um, just that I just kind of want to restate that so folks kind of understand what you just kind of said. So was it always the intention that the personal products would support the personal banking needs of your business clients, or do you also have
Yeah.
just personal? Okay.
Oh, of
Okay.
course. Yeah, sure. I mean, we have, you know, of the number of accounts that we have, I would say 2/3 of them are just consumer only.
Okay.
So it's not unusual for somebody to have a checking or a money market account. So yeah, and we have not in any way abandoned the consumer. In fact, we're one of the few banks in the Inland Empire that actually have a free checking account. We think that that's important. I mean, our whole emphasis on the consumer and on the business side is don't nickel and dime customers. They don't like that. So, we do offer a free checking account and have for decades.
Okay. So I understand that in terms of the personal side or the consumer side of the banking equation. It's interesting that I did not know that you, from a business side, and I kind of want to segue into that for a moment if I can. You're working with business owners throughout our backyard, the Inland Empire. But you're actually now, or have been for some time apparently, dealing with commercial lending and perhaps other banking services outside of the state of California. So you're, on your way to nationwide, being that you have 40 plus states that you do business in today. Is that right?
That's correct. In fact, HCN really stands for Hemet California Nationwide, and that's just an evolving of what our kind of focus has been over the decades. We started out as kind of Hemet, then we branched into California, and now we're nationwide. But one of the things that when we say we're nationwide, it's really we have commercial real estate properties that are in other states. That's
Okay.
most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, that's owned by a California resident. They
Okay.
just happen to have commercial property in Dallas or Denver, something like that. When we're dealing with the local businesses, those are almost always in our marketplace.
Okay.
Small businesses.
Okay. So then, from a business banking standpoint, is your so it sounds like commercial lending is a big piece of that pie. In addition to commercial lending, you offer, as I understand, some more traditional business banking services, right?
Sure.
The money transfers and merchant services and
All the treasury management, yes.
Okay. So if commercial lending Kevin, is that an area that you're trying to grow more prominently? Do those two things go hand in hand, the treasury related products and commercial? Okay.
They do. I think what's maybe a little bit unique for us is many of the I would say community banks will lead with an SBA loan product, a Small Business Administration loan. That's not really where our focus is. We have partners that can do SBA loans more efficiently than we can. So we'll go out to the local businesses and talk to them, but it's more about maybe treasury management products or what would normally be called deposit-oriented products, and any commercial lending opportunities that they may have. So I think that maybe differentiates us a little bit from that, but we're still looking to expand, which is our assets at the bank. I mean, our footprint, if you will. So we're looking for additional deposits, additional loans. All of the things. Just getting more customers, greater relationships, richer relationships. That's really been a focus of our bank for many years.
Okay, you mentioned I kind of want to understand the SBA piece versus some of the lending that you do.
Sure.
Can you, for a layman, can you clarify for me when would a business owner choose to go with an SBA loan versus financing that they could receive through HCN Bank?
Yeah, so I would say when you think of an SBA loan, oftentimes that's going to be for a newer business, a startup. The Small Business Administration is trying to promote that growth, and these would not be clients who would typically be able to get a normal, let's call it a credit line. Let's say if you're an existing business, you have a long history, you can go to a bank and say, I'd like to get $1 million credit line, and based on the soundness of the business, the bank would make a decision on that. If you're a newer business, that's going to be virtually impossible. So the SBA, they're good programs, but there's a lot of paperwork. They could be expensive. But it's in many cases, it's the only way you can go as a newer business. And there's several different kinds of SBA programs. That I would say is a little different than, again, your existing business who basically has the wherewithal to be able to command better rates and maybe better programs.
Okay, can I ask you to clarify a little bit more, delineate that between those two groups of businesses that you just described, right? So you kind of describe them as newer businesses that are better suited for an SBA loan because they may not have the longevity, the history, the resources, assets, et cetera, that the other group that would be more inclined to come to a bank like yours. Is there such a thing as an ideal client that you could describe, or customer that you could describe that belongs in your bucket versus those that belong in the SBA?
I think that when you ideal clients, first of all, I would say, if oftentimes we try to look at things a little bit differently at our bank, and the reality is we don't have levels of approval that we always kind of like to call it an inverted org chart. So oftentimes it's Mickey. It's Mickey talking to the clients. It's myself going out and talking to clients. Our chief credit officer, we do a lot more of that where we can have face-to-face as opposed to a loan officer who's going to kind of talk to the business and eventually upload it to senior management. Senior management makes a decision. The loan officer communicates that back to the business. We have a lot of we kind of do it a little different. We go almost backwards, if you will. So first of all, we like to think whenever we're meeting with businesses, whatever we tell them, we're going to do, because it's the decision makers that are having the initial meeting. And obviously you're going to collect financial information, sometimes appraisals, etc. But getting to your question, Norm, about is there an ideal business, if you will, I would say really no, because there will be times that we'll look at a new business and we'll say, we like what we hear here. It's not we're not going to place a tremendous bet. Maybe it's $100,000 credit line, but there's no collateral or anything else. But we look at this and we say, we like the sponsors here. We're confident in their business plan. So that would be one that's a little bit unique for us, but one that, those are the kinds of conversations we have all the time. If we can't do that, then we hand it off to somebody who might specialize in the program's going to be a little bit different. There will be more paperwork, etc. So I would say that's one end of the continuum, if you will. Most of our loans, a good chunk of them are commercial real estate. So there's a building that's backing the loan. And a lot of those are owned by investors, somebody who has multiple properties and they want to refinance because they can get a better rate with us than maybe what they have, or they're purchasing a building. So that's really what our expertise would be in commercial real estate. So I don't know. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I appreciate that. I think something I want to touch on really quickly, but I want to kind of talk a little bit more about a little bit more about in terms of how you support business owners who may not even understand what options are available to them, or that they might be better off with a line of credit than they would refinancing their mortgage on a commercial property, or right. So, but before you address that, can I go back for a second?
Yep.
Did you? I heard you say that you actually talk directly with business owners yourself.
Yes.
That's an important part of your model.
That's a very important part of our model, because I always kind of say it's the second line on my business card. Nobody cares about me, but the position of when the CEO goes out and talks to local businesses, that's a differentiator for us. I mean, no disrespect to the big banks, but they're not going to have their CEO come out to the Inland Empire and talk to a business. So yes, that's absolutely a key part of our business. I spend a lot of time talking with clients. If we don't have the solution, trying to do a handoff, and being in the business for 23 years, you get to know the people who can deliver for you, and they're not going to try to steal your business. They understand their lane, and the customer appreciates that. It's kind of a best of breed approach that I think people are, they understand.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, and that's admirable, quite frankly, because a lot of organizations would try and hold on to as much as they can and feel uncomfortable with the idea of passing off an existing customer to another organization for a specific need.
Right.
So that's
We've
huge.
had these relationships, and sometimes for decades, and at the end of the day, if the customer is getting a better solution, that's all we care about, and they appreciate it.
Yeah, it speaks volumes to the quality of the relationship itself. So. Yeah, I very much appreciate that answer. So, the back to where I was stammering on just a moment ago about business owners that I'll give you an example. There's a firm here in Riverside that has been using short-term credit financing for cash flow purposes, primarily for the business.
Right.
And those had been, and they were relatively new. They're in business now for 8 or 9 years, but at the time, in the beginning, they got a lot of these loans. They paid an incredibly high interest rate on these loans. And it was only when this business owner was presented with the idea that maybe a more substantial line of credit from a reputable organization that they could borrow and pay back, as a line of credit is designed to do, would be a better option. Now, they have since gone out and taken advantage of that, but he literally went several years with just kind of assuming that the high-cost, short-term lenders were the solution. How do you... So I assume that education, that in terms of interaction when you first meet a new business owner or even an existing client, they need to know and understand what types of financial options are available to them out there. How do you go about doing that?
Let me give you a perfect example, because it happened maybe 30 days ago. There was a couple of owners of a new coffee shop that they were involved in. I mean, and one of our executives knew the clients, so we had lunch. The executive, myself, and the two people who owned the coffee shop. They wanted to build a second coffee shop. So we talked at length about not only the relationship they had with their existing bank, which was a little, there wasn't a big relationship there. I mean, it was with one of the larger banks, and larger banks are going to focus on larger customers. They didn't kind of get the love that I thought they deserved. But anyway, our point, my point here, Norm, is what we said is, why don't you do this? Why don't you come into our office? At Sunnyside, we have a conference room in here, and we do a lot of meetings with myself, our chief credit officer, and whomever if there's a business development officer that brought the deal in, and the clients. Because what we do is we kind of say, look, we want to just use this as kind of education for you. Whether or not we do any business, that's fine. I mean, maybe we do, maybe we don't, maybe it's 5 years from now. But what we'll do is we'll say, where you are right now, we think that you would probably have to do this type of lending. And maybe in your example that you just mentioned, they had an expensive factoring line or an accounts receivable line. Those can be very expensive. And there are better solutions if you're more bankable. So what we try to do is kind of give them the steps to say, once your revenues are X, we think you'll be in a position to get a credit line of this. Or maybe we'll say, we'll start you with a smaller credit line of, and I'm just throwing a number, of $50,000. But as your revenues go up, we look at that expanding to $250,000 or whatever. So then they at least have kind of triggers. They have kind of a roadmap to say, okay, if we don't get to that level of revenues, we probably are not eligible, but we always keep the communication lines as open as possible. We will never, ever, if a customer wants to meet with us and talk about that, that's the fun part of our job. We can kind of sketch it out for them and say, hey, first of all, we think you're bankable right now, or you're close, but but that's all part of the education that they should be receiving from someone.
Yeah, I think a roadmap to the future of financing or bank products just makes a ton of sense for a lot of businesses here in the local community, and I don't think many of them get that.
Well, I would say, Norm, and I tell this to a lot of people. I'll tell this to you: give them my cell phone number and just have them call me, and then I can have a conversation with them if they have time and they're close. I think it's always better to do face to face. We can meet for coffee, we can have lunch. We buy a lot of lunches. We do that all the time. Or just come into our office here and we can just brainstorm. We have a lot of brainstorming sessions right here in our office with businesses, and they walk out hopefully with more education. At least they kind of say, okay, we know where this is going. If nothing else, they help take some of the uncertainty out of it. Because let's face it, banking it's kind of esoteric. It kind of gets into the weeds. Let people run their own business and let us try to articulate what the banking piece of it means for them.
That's so important. Yeah, I completely agree with that. You mentioned, or should I say, from your website, I understood that you mentioned portfolio lending. And I just want to touch on that really briefly and make sure I understand it, because
Sure.
I spent almost 30 years in lending on the residential side.
Okay.
And so we wrote loans, some that were portfolio and some that were secondary market investor driven.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure I understand, is that kind of the same thing? Do you have more flexibility with portfolio lending? Talk to me about that.
It is. So that's exactly it. When you're creating loans and having them sold in the secondary market, they have to fit certain criteria. Because the secondary market, if they're going to put a bond together to buy all of these single family residences, like in your particular situation, it has to have a FICO score of this, it has to have a loan to value of this, it has to have blah, blah, blah. When you portfolio, you can put whatever you want on your books. So we only put loans on that we intend to keep and hold into our portfolio. Now, sometimes we'll sell those to other banks. We haven't been doing a lot of that lately, but we'll always keep part of it because we don't ever want the perception to be we're trying to push off stuff that we wouldn't want to keep in our portfolio. So anyway, but yes, and the other thing about our portfolio, it's a very clean portfolio. I mean, it sounds like banking. This is public information. If you go onto the FDIC site, you'll see that our delinquency level is 0.00, and it has been for about 8 straight years.
Wow.
No loans. We don't even have a 30-day delinquent loan in our entire portfolio, because we do. Again, we're a conservative lender, we think, but we also. I'd like to say after being in business for 50 years plus, we know what we're doing, So we try not to get too greedy. We try to make deals that make sense. We deal with good clients, and as a result, it's been a good ride for us.
That is amazing. I believe, not having spent time really in the a little bit, but not so much on the commercial side, just being on the residential side. I know that we would actually evaluate loans for that were being packaged for the secondary market with how many of them had a first 90-day delinquent mortgage
Right.
payment.
Right.
So to have a delinquency rate that's below 1%,
Yeah.
I got to believe that is astonishing. Is that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that
I would say there are quite a few banks that, that are below 1%,
okay?
and there are some that have zero. But those are usually going to be ones that aren't trying to grow real fast. I mean, if your business model is to grow fast and sell, you're going to put loans on that probably are going to come back to bite you in the backside. That's not our game plan. We are by design a slow growth bank, and that's for other reasons. But we have no desire to sell. We never talk about that. We've been around for 50 years, and we're talking and obviously doing things that we're building for the next generation.
Okay. The in terms of the so one of the things that's I'm still amazed by the fact that you are picking up your cell phone and talking to prospective customers. That being said, a lot of us have become really comfortable with the idea of self-directing our banking activities through using online
Right.
access.
Sure.
I think at the same time, we still want to have a person, right?
Right.
We still need to have a personal relationship that we could even one day, when it comes to dealing with a peer or a fellow business owner, say, "I got a person for that I can refer to you." Is the It seems that it's probably the answer is probably going to be yes, but being localized and being so hands-on. Do I, as a business owner, have a personal relationship with a banking officer?
You do.
Okay.
Right. And that's an important part of every business owner is going to have a private banking officer. So, JP, you mentioned him. We have several others, and they always do. And I'll go out on a lot of calls with JP, and I'll hand my card and say, if for some reason you can't get a hold of JP, here's my number, and call me. And I don't get too many of those calls, but I do on occasion. And I like that. That's part of we have to differentiate and bring value to a client. What do we have that the large banks don't have? And that's part of it. If I'm not, I look at it this way, in my position, if I'm not doing that, I'm wasting the position. I mean, that to me is an asset that we're just not leveraging, because it's not me, it's the position. If the CEO is not out there meeting with their clients, and especially their good clients, something's wrong. I mean, they shouldn't be buried behind a desk. I mean, that's my philosophy. And when I turn over the reins down the road, I'm going to make sure that that's a piece of what that CEO is doing. I mean, you have to be in front of clients. I mean, and it's the most rewarding part of the job anyway. I mean, I could sit here and look at spreadsheets all day long, but mixing it up with businesses and learning about what they do, that's to me, that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Can we talk about technology for a second? It is I would imagine, it's a bar that is ever rising in terms of being able to provide access resources for clients from an online standpoint.
Right.
A big piece of that is, especially when you're talking about an organization's, a business's, or an individual's money, is security.
Right.
I just recently received 2 days ago a letter from a corporation that alerted me that my data has been they had a data breach.
Right.
So as a smaller organization, as opposed to the big national banks, Is that something that you focus on? Is that a challenge for you? How do you deal with cybersecurity and
Yeah, I
access
mean,
for clients?
it's a huge focus, not only for us, but for community banks in general. But let me give you, there's kind of a misperception, I think, that when you say a community bank can't have the resources that a B of A or a Citibank would have for cybersecurity. And I would challenge that thesis based on the following. Remember, if you're a community bank, we certainly do not have the IT infrastructure here from with our current staffing to put all of the mechanisms in place to keep deposits safe. Okay, but the caveat there is there are companies that provide that service. So Fiserv, for instance, deals with 3,000 community banks, and oftentimes the products that we have are better than the ones that the big boys have because they're fintech companies that are out there knowing that banks like us need it, and they just defray the cost by enlisting 2,000 banks or whatever. So they have a very good they oftentimes will have a very good product that 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 we would certainly not be able to build in house. We just go to them, and so. And Fiserv, for instance, is our core processor. We have a lot of services. We've been with them for 30 years. They're a huge company. I think that's where the Milwaukee Bucks played. Their basketball games at Fiserv Stadium.
Right.
So, but those are the kinds of companies that community banks like us use to stay competitive. We have a cybersecurity committee. We actually we partner with the Homeland Defense, and we try to kind of take that out to the local communities. Some of the senior centers where there's been a lot of elder abuse. I mean, we want to make sure we're getting in front of that. So, yes, that's something that we're taking seriously, and we do things sometimes that are maybe considered old school. But for instance, if you were to say, I want to wire something out, wire money out, we're going to give you a telephone call on the number that you provided us just to make sure that was you. And sometimes, I would say 95% of the time, the customer will say, thank you so much for calling. Or 5% of the time they might say, why are you calling me? Well, we're doing that because there's a lot of wire fraud. We have a specific department that looks at all of the kind of weird transactions, and they'll pick up the phone and call and say, we just want to make sure that this payment that you're making to XYZ is legit because this is out of pattern for you. So Norm, I would say because we don't have a zillion accounts, we can do that and be a little bit more hand-holding. And quite honestly, the losses, as fraud has just skyrocketed over the last 5 years, our losses have been very minimal. And I think a lot of it is because we can go a little bit slower, we can make that phone call, we're going to protect our customers as best we can.
Fabulous. Okay, so maybe just one or two more questions. I know that I understand that there is a concerted effort to bring HCN Bank into the awareness of the 330,000 folks that live in this city of Riverside in particular. Recognizing or already acknowledging that you are all over the Inland Empire and certainly in the state and dabbling across the country. Is there a message that you have that you could share about just kind of an overarching message about why HCN should be my business bank and or even personal lines or consumer lines?
Well, I think when the first thing that comes to my mind, Norm, is, are we delivering? I mean, we like to consider ourselves to be a high-touch, high-tech bank, So I think we've always been high-touch. We don't lose customers on service. Very, very seldomly do we lose them on service because we've always been high-touch. I think the technology piece, especially with Mickey coming on board, we're doing some things that are quite honestly revolutionary for banks our size. So we're really I would say elevating that piece of it. So you as a customer will always have you can do business however you want, whether it's your phone, whether it's coming into the branch. We'll never ever be that bank that says, hey, when you're in the branch, you can find a more efficient way if you go online. We invite people into our lobby. But I would say you as a customer, what else is different? First of all, you're always going to have access to your own private banking officer. So you don't have to go through the phone tree. You don't have to wonder, oh God, I've got a problem. You're always going to have access to executives, myself, whomever, if you run into a problem. I always tell people, call me. I probably don't have the solution, but I know the person who does, and I can get a hold of that person. So because you as a customer, as a business, I tell them, you will invariably run into a problem. You will. I mean, it happens. You just want to be able to get that problem resolved, and you don't have to worry about that because you have the person who can get that resolved. So I think that's that. I think as it relates to our products and services, I think to some extent that's a commodity. All banks have about the same thing. I mentioned our free checking account. I think that's a differentiator. That just helps people, who are living paycheck to paycheck, I think. So I think that's a differentiator, but it's really the service, the delivery. If you run into an issue, do they act like they want your business? And we do, I think. Sometimes I walk into not necessarily banks, but companies, and you almost feel like you're kind of an annoyance to them. I like companies that they thank you for the business. They appreciate you, and you really feel like, okay, yeah, they want my business, and we hopefully we're conveying that 100% of the time.
That is that's a question that I don't think a lot of us think about in our regular interactions with all the different types of businesses that we interact with. Because it kind of strikes me that do they act like they want to do business with me, that they want my business?
Exactly.
And as opposed to just being a number or being one of many, is there a personal connection there, and do they care? So I love that. Okay, so all of that being said, and I appreciate you spending some time with us and talking about HCN Bank and even a little personal insight about yourself. Kevin, what question didn't I ask that I should have?
I don't know. Maybe where banking is going, or where is there a future for community banks?
Let's answer that one.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, first of all, I think yes, there's a great future for community banks for the following reasons. As the banks continue to get bigger, as the big banks swallow up other banks, I think that just leaves a greater opportunity for community banks that are out there because, and again, I don't mean to be disparaging against big banks, but yeah, their model is different. They're stock driven. They're always looking for most efficient ways of doing things, and sometimes customers get upset because their issues surface that are not resolved. And so we look at that as the bigger get even bigger. We're there. we're there. We do things differently, and I think it gives us an opportunity to reach out to clients who may not be satisfied with other banks to say, there's a different solution here, and this is how we roll. And from what I hear in talking to clients, sometimes they'll flat out say, why didn't I know about you earlier? And sometimes they'll say, shame on us for maybe not getting out and kind of letting them know our story. But it really is satisfying when we hear that we're able to provide some type of solution or do things in a certainly a more positive way, because let's face it, deposits and loans, I mean, that's the bread and butter of banks. Clients should feel valued by banks because they have something banks need. If they're not feeling valued, there's a problem there. And again, there are a lot of bankers that I think are maybe thinking they kind of have this element of arrogance. Like, we have the money, they come to us, and it's just it's so simple sometimes, Norm, to just kind of say, just be there for the customer. When they call you, don't wait until the end of the day to call them back. Call them right there on the spot. Surprise them. Oh, wow, I just called you. I can't believe you're calling me back. I tell our people, you're never going to go the day without returning a phone call if somebody calls you. You're going to call them back that day. Why not call them back in 5 minutes when you know they have time and they're there and you're going to surprise them? It's amazing, how often when I return a phone call, they're like, "Oh, you're calling me back so soon." Well, why, and it's kind of a sad commentary on the industry. It's like, well, what do they expect? But I don't know. I just think a lot of it is common sense, common courtesy. Just treating people like people, and we do that. I think we do that with our employees. I think we do that with our clients.
Okay. That's a great answer. I do. I can tell you that having ran a division for one of the big banks many years ago, we measured success based on the number of products that the typical or average customer of the bank had. Right. So, and we set goals that we wanted them to have 6 different products: car loans, credit cards, accounts, etc. And that's literally how we saw the customer. And what you just described is the opposite of that. So I appreciate that, hands down.
I worked for the company that coined the phrase "8 is great." That was from the old Norwest. That Richard Kovacevic, I think, was the one who coined that phrase. He was the CEO. Of course, they went on to buy Wells Fargo. You know what happened there.
Yep.
No, that is not us at all. I don't even know what our cross-sell ratio is. I don't care what our cross-sell ratio is. It's not something that's measured. The last thing I want to do is try to cross-sell a product a customer does not need just so somebody gets add something to their personal scoreboard. That makes no sense to us. Customers need different solutions. Cross-sell ratio is not important to us whatsoever.
I think that's a perfect place to end. I love that conclusion. I do want to say, first of all, thank you for spending the time with us.
Sure.
It's a opportunity for a longtime Inland Empire resident as myself to kind of understand the community banks, because we all see the big banks all around us, and there's so few remaining community banks. So to talk to someone who has dedicated really his professional career to this type of banking, and offers a level of touch that includes his personal cell phone number is unique, to say the very least. And I will. This information will be included in terms of contact information in the magazine where the profile will be, but I encourage folks to reach out to HCN Bank directly, and for that matter, feel free to ask for Kevin, and I'm sure he's more than happy to talk with you and talk about your situation and see if there's a fit. So, Kevin, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Glad I got to know you. So, should I hit the leave button now, or keep it on?
Keep it on. I'm gonna do a test here. I'm gonna click on stop. Okay. So we've been recording up to this point. Okay. So I'm gonna click stop here. If it cuts us off, if you can just wait, just go get a cup of coffee, come back and check, and it should at some point say uploaded 100%.
Okay, not a problem. I'll probably just break into my emails right now. So.
Perfect. Just toggle back as soon as it says 100%. We're good to go. And I appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin.
It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.